Bellevue, West Side.
All right. I'm gonna do that.
Put on the charm.
All right. I have to make sure I'm muted on YouTube, otherwise. Yeah, see. Okay. All
And
right,
the
we
school
ready?
is Penn Ridge, is that the school?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, we ready, everyone?
Yep. Do you want me to take care of posting the link and stuff like that on Twitter?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I'll take care of that, and you guys can do your thing.
All right. Oops. Let's redo that. Okay. All right. So, hi, everyone. We are here with Scott Sheriff, who is a keyboardist for Carrie Underwood primarily, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Who else are you working with, or are you just with her?
She's my primary person that I tour with. I've toured with some other folks in the past, but can't really take any other gigs while I'm on with her. I just kind of have to be ready when she puts things on the schedule, when we can get back out there and start playing shows. And I've got some bands that I play with here in Nashville, but I guess we'll probably get into that as we go.
Yeah. So
Well, can I piggyback a question on that? So you talk about you're just kind of on standby until she puts something on the calendar. So how much in advance can she do that?
Generally we find out, a few months in advance. So there's plenty of notice.
All right.
So for those of you, no, probably none of you know this, but Scott's originally from Bethlehem, so he's a Lehigh Valley guy. And our connection was that you were in a high school band with my uncle, and you guys are still in contact. I know my grandparents watch all of your Facebook videos and that sort of thing. But
why aren't you watching our Facebook videos?
Yeah.
No, just leave it to the grandparents.
I get a report every time you put a new video out. I get it like a text or it's dinner conversation with my grandparents. So, but
Scott, we had to tell her who Kenny Loggins was.
Oh no!
Yeah,
this was the pre-podcast conversation.
Scary.
Surely she knew the songs, maybe not the artist, right?
Yeah, we'll say that.
Oh my gosh! But I have just to show our students, I have this photo of you and my uncle from when you guys were in a band together.
Uncle Mike, there he is.
Uncle Mike, yeah. So that's my uncle there. And then it looks like, is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. So you guys were in a high school band together. And so that's how you ended up on our podcast, but it's very cool. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, those are the good old days.
Okay, so can we just start by hearing a little bit about like your upbringing, your music education, your college education, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I was in the Saucon Valley School District my whole life, or my whole education, and we got some really good music appreciation classes. And starting in 5th grade, kind of opened our eyes to contemporary music. It wasn't just all by the book text stuff, but we had a teacher named Dennis Smith who introduced us to, at that time it was Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Kansas and Genesis, and he showed us what synthesizers were and showed us how classical music can be made modern and contemporary and how artists were out there doing it. And then he would taught us a little bit about ragtime, and that introduced us to Billy Joel with his Root Beer Rag and so on and so forth. So he was really good at tying in, legitimate forms, quote unquote, of music with contemporary music, and just show us how it has evolved and how it was still relevant. And so that kind of piqued our interest. And I picked up the trumpet in 4th grade, played it in elementary school band, and junior high I switched to valve trombone because I got braces, and the trumpet was a little rough to press down on my embouchure with those metal right underneath my lips. So I switched to a bigger mouthpiece, was in jazz and show choir in high school. And that was the same teacher. Dennis Smith was our high school choir director. And we started to get involved in vocal jazz and Singers Unlimited, stuff like Manhattan Transfer. And I played in jazz band and the Jazz Combo. I started to pick up keyboards seriously kind of in late junior high school. And so our band director had kind of a jazz combo on the side, and I played keyboards in that. And that's when I started buying synthesizers and finding out about MTV, and discovered I could play by ear, watching MTV videos, Hall & Oates in particular. They had songs out like Kiss on My List and Private Eyes, and they had really interesting piano parts that I wanted to learn. And so I just kind of sat down at my piano with my boombox and discovered that I could actually play these things just kind of by listening and figuring it out. Even though I could read music because I was a trumpet student, and I was a piano student for a short time as a youngster, but I kind of gave it up because I was bored with it and wasn't getting interesting enough music to play in my lessons. So then I kind of rediscovered the piano when I found out I could play by ear. And I started studying with a local teacher named Matt Gillespie, who had a big band at the time. And he kind of schooled me in jazz chords, extended chord tensions, and just kind of expanded my ear and taught me how to play jazz standards and kind of expand my understanding of chords and major seventh chords and ninth chords and 13 chords, and just real juicy, big old jazz chords. And that really kind of tickled my ear. I'm never been a real hardcore bebop jazz lover, but I really like jazz influence on pop music. Bands kind of like Steely Dan, Toto, a lot of the David Foster, Al Jarreau, Jay Graydon productions that were out in the 80s and 90s. And so that kind of was where I was headed musically. And Dennis Smith, our high school choir director, was feeding me lots of music to listen to and study and learn. And I would pick up these things and take them to my teacher and play them in my lessons. And but at the time, I knew that music was going to be a hard road. So I went to Penn State as a business major and just kind of took music classes as a minor. And so I was going through the regular, they call them BDR classes, where they're just basic math, science, English, all that stuff. And I took a few music classes as electives, and my teachers were kind of surprised I wasn't a music major. I was excelling in those classes. They were kind of pushing me to you should really study music. And I had one choir director in particular. His name was James Jordan. He was the university choir director at the time. He thought I should study music, but not at Penn State. He knew that wasn't the place for me to study contemporary music. It was more of a music ed type location and more legitimate, straight ahead choir study and band study. He knew that if I wanted to get involved in contemporary pop music, I needed to go somewhere else. So he suggested a few places: Temple, Juilliard, Berkeley, and Berkeley is where I landed. So I convinced my parents that that's what I wanted to do, and they were agreeable to it. So we went and visited, and I ended up finishing my last 3 years there. I was able to transfer some classes from Penn State, and after going for a summer, I was able to catch up enough to where I graduated on time from Berkeley. So that is my education and upbringing. I don't think I left anything out. Of course, there's drama. There's the garage band that we put together in high school with Uncle Mike and two other guys from Saucon Valley that I had been in a previous band with. Previous band, we were pretty hardcore rock. It was more The Who and Beatles and Rolling Stones and some Black Sabbath. And there wasn't a whole lot for me to do keyboard wise. And that band kind of dissolved. And we discovered your Uncle Mike at a battle of the bands with this previous band. And turns out that he was only with that band for that one show, because I guess he might have been too young at the time, or for whatever reason, it wasn't working out. And your grandmother was a teacher at our high school. And so we always loved her and would see her in school. And I guess she mentioned to us that, hey, Mike's looking for another band if you guys know of anything. The thing with the band's name was Passage. It didn't work out, and so the three of us from that band kind of started putting our heads together and say, we need to contact him because I think we can do some fun stuff with Mike. And he turned out to be a great drummer for us. We were able to expand into a lot of the more difficult progressive bands at the time with Yes and Genesis and Rush and Styx. But we still played a lot of top 40 at that time. It was the heyday of MTV. So it was Billy Squier and the Fix and Hall & Oates and all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of Billy Joel. And so we played some high school dances. We played at Saucon, we played at Freedom, we played at East Hills, just wherever we could get our foot in the door. And at that time, there was a underage club real close to the Boyd Theater, downtown Bethlehem. It was called Scarlett O'Hara's, and it was underground. It was pretty cool underage club. And so we played there a few times, and we played at Music Fest. One of the very first years that they had that open, there was a stage up by the library on top
Yeah, I
at
think
the
it's
end of
still
the
there.
bridge. I don't know if there's still one there, but we played there, and unfortunately the rain cut our set short, but that was fun. And after that, that's when I went off to Berkeley and never really got back to the Lehigh Valley except for the summers. I moved straight to Nashville after I graduated Berkeley in '89.
So the James Jordan you're talking about, is he the Westminster James Jordan?
Yes.
Wow.
Same guy.
That's awesome that you had a connection with him.
Yeah, he is. He was really encouraging, a really engaging choir director. I really liked him a lot.
Yeah, he's very well known.
Yeah.
I used to teach at Southern Lehigh in the 80s and 90s, so I knew Dennis. Great
Okay.
guy. Great
And
guy.
Ann Pope's a real good friend of ours too.
Yeah,
If you know her from Southern Lehigh, she was the middle school, I think, principal or vice principal. But it might have been 2000s by the time she was over there.
Yeah, I ditched them 21 years ago.
Okay.
Came to Penridge. Yeah.
Steve's like nodding left and right, like we're locking in on all the bands and the groups and things like that are firing. You know, the college directors.
I'm going down memory lane.
You're in. Out of curiosity, for a reference point, Marissa, do you know who Kansas is?
Yes, come
How
on
about
now.
Toto?
Stop it.
Not the dog, different
Yeah,
Toto.
see?
Stop it.
Okay.
Okay, moving on.
Youngin.
So,
So I actually had a question about the jazz stuff that you mentioned, Scott. When I was actually surprised, so I was thinking as you were talking about, you worked kind of backwards from the synthesizer stuff towards jazz. I was surprised at first when you said that bop wasn't really the wheelhouse that you found yourself in. Do you have like where do you fall kind of on jazz standards? Like what's your favorite kind of stuff to listen to or play in that era?
I really don't enjoy playing jazz standards, except maybe on solo piano. I'll do I'll fill in, chords around a melody, whether it's My Romance or All the Things You Are. So just the real dyed in the wool standard songs. I don't enjoy listening to extended improvisation in particular. I get bored with it pretty quick. I appreciate that skill and I don't possess it per se. I can do a little bit of improvisation, but it's really not where I excel. Where I excel is digging in and listening and understanding full arrangements and what's going on and doing note-on transcriptions of each part that's happening. More often than not in a pop rock environment. So a lot of what I do are full band transcriptions of these classic pop songs that were on the radio, and just so our bands in Nashville can play them as authentically as possible. And I get hired by other people to do kind of the same thing, but it's more of it's an after the fact. They'll go into the studio, record, and then they kind of break it back down and ask me, okay, write down what we just did so that the people that come after us can play it. So I've had clients like Kelly Clarkson, the producer David Foster goes out and does live shows. His team has hired me to do that same kind of thing. And with him, it's always different because he's got different special guests at every one of his shows. So they call them takedowns. I've done takedowns of Celine Dion songs, Bocelli, Kenny Loggins, Earth, Wind and Fire. And then he's even had guys like Billy Ray Cyrus and Blake Shelton at his show. So it's really kind of spanned, the whole gamut of different genres as far as what I've done takedowns for him for.
So Scott, on your website, it says you are a musical, engraver.
That's what that is. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Basically, I work in a software notation program, and when they call that music engraving, when you present the final, written product of
right.
what you want people to play.
What software do you like to use?
I use Sibelius.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think that for me, that's the one that I like. A lot of people swear by finale, but for me,
Yeah.
the way my brain works, it's Sibelius. I don't know why.
I've never really, it's mostly because of the cost. I've never gone down the finale road, and the few times I've maybe messed around with a free copy, it hasn't seemed intuitive. But if it's what you learn on, then it's more
Right.
intuitive to you. But Sibelius to me made a little more what you see is what you get kind of sense when you're working. Although it's definitely a loaded gun, so to speak. If you're not careful, you can start hitting buttons on your keyboard thinking that you're just playing, and all of a sudden you've got a score full of garbage. Then you didn't realize that your cursor was active. So you just kind of have to know your way around it and know how to hit escape.
Yeah.
And one other thing for those of you out there that are trying music notation, there is a program that I use that has cut my workflow easily in half. A lot of my clients will give me songs to work on, and they'll give me a stream, which is horrible. Trying to transcribe from a stream is awful, at least to me. Trying to go back and forth from one program to the next and move the scrub, trying to get to the right place so you can hear the chorus again. I need a file. I need an MP3 of what you want me to work on. And there's a program called Transcribe that works in the background of whatever your notation program is. It could be Sibelius, it could be Finale, but it allows you to stay in Sibelius, and you can navigate through that program with certain soft keys on your keyboard that don't affect Sibelius, and you don't use them with Sibelius, but it allows you to rewind. You have to start by formatting the original song. You put the MP3 into Transcribe, and then you have a section button, a measure button, and a beat button. And you basically map out the whole song, section, beat, 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 measure, beat, 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 all the way through the song. When the section changes, you hit the section button, and it formats your song in a way that you can then later on navigate through the song one measure at a time. You can jump back a section, jump forward a section, jump forward a measure, jump forward a beat, and it really cuts down on the constant rewinding and scrubbing and moving your cursor and trying to get back to the place that you wanted to transcribe. It's instantaneous, and it is, I could not live without it. I would rather not transcribe than transcribe without. So actually transcribe without transcribe program.
So what happens if there's a crescendo, not a crescendo, a retardando or accelerando?
You just map it whatever tempo you want. All right. So if it slows down, then you hit it slower, and then you can go back and move it if you missed it. Nothing's permanent.
Yeah.
So it's real easy to do that way.
That's awesome.
So, hang on, Marissa. So is that
okay. What
is your bread and butter? You know what I mean?
Well, it really depends on the season. Carrie tours when she puts out a record. So the time periods after she first releases a record, those are mainly touring is my bread and butter. And then when the tour is wrapping up, I'll go back to doing more transcribing and local shows here around Nashville. And then when the tour starts up again, that stuff kind of slows down. Or I can do transcribe on the road, so it kind of is always there in the background.
So I think some kids, maybe I think everybody glorifies touring. Can you give us what is it as glamorous as everybody thinks it is, or is it?
I think it depends on what you enjoy. I don't mind living out of a suitcase. If that's something you can't stand, then touring's not for you. I prefer riding on a bus to riding in a plane. So touring is great for me. When we get to fly date season, I don't really like that because you have to get to the airport ridiculous amount early morning and way ahead of time and go through all the security. I mean, but that's still part of touring. It's not really a fair comparison, but I like touring because I get to go around the country and see friends that I have in all these cities, without having to plan a specific personal trip to go see them. So to me, it's kind of, it helps, and it satisfies my need to connect with friends and family who are all over the country. It's definitely got its pluses and minuses. If you like home cooking, you're not going to get, home cooking for 9 months or whatever, however out you're on tour. You're getting catered meals every day, and they're great. Our catering company is wonderful. And then you grab restaurants on your days off. If you like to travel and see the sights and live in hotels, it's not bad. I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy touring. It's a good break from the home life. I kind of like the going back and forth between both. So we stay in nice hotels and are treated very well. So but being a band member, it's also good because I can remain incognito for the most part. I can and have walked right through the crowds as they're exiting the arena in my street clothes, and nobody knows who I am.
It's interesting. I think the thing that everyone's asking here along the side is how did you become Carrie Underwood's keyboardist? Like, what is the path that you take to get there?
It's just hard work and meeting people and always showing up, doing a good job regardless of the status or stature of the particular gig that you're doing. I've been in Nashville since '89. And when I moved to town, I was waiting tables, just playing whatever musical gigs that I could get my hands on, but putting my full effort into everything, making it as good as I can, regardless of what it paid or how many people were there to watch it. And that helps you develop a reputation. And you just from being in town longer and longer, you just meet more and more people, network. I mean, I'm not a schmoozer per se, but you just meet more people and they take your number. Hey, you did a great job. I'd love to have you on this gig or have you on this other gig. And my first big job, I guess, was playing back in the 90s, mid 90s. There was a pretty big song called Butterfly Kisses, and the artist's name was Bob Carlisle. And before he was a solo artist, he had a band called Allies. They were a Christian band, and they were pretty big in that market. And that was my first gig with a traveling band. And they had a record deal and were pretty well known on Christian radio. And I felt like, yeah, I made it. I actually got somewhere somebody's heard of, and we're going to actually go out and play shows, and I'm going to get paid to play music. And that lasted a few years. I did a record with them. And at that point, a friend of mine I'd gone to Berkeley with was Stephen Curtis Chapman's road manager and keyboard player. He and his wife were on the road with Stephen, and they were getting off the road. So he called to let me know, hey, just get ahead of the curve here. I'm getting ready to leave this gig. So you should, if you're interested, you should call his management. So I called Stephen's management company and said, hey, my name's blah, blah, blah. I play with Allies. And everybody knew who they were because they were on Christian radio. So that was kind of a familiarity, foot in the door, someone they had heard of. In Nashville, a lot of time it's getting someone to vouch for you or getting something on your resume that's big enough that will vouch for you to get your foot in the door with somebody else. Not many people will take a chance on it, maybe a complete unknown, but, oh, well, if it's good enough for so-and-so, then it'll be good enough for us, kind of thing. So-and-so has hired this person. They've got their stamp of approval on that. So we can go ahead and hire him. So they got me an audition. I went in and prepared as well as I could. I'm a singer as well. So not just playing an instrument, but also singing is a valuable tool as a sideman. And so I went and learned background parts and learned all the background parts. I didn't just pick one because I didn't want to get stuck in the audition. If they've got a guitar player who only learned the same part I learned, it's better for versatility if you can tell the artist, oh, you want me to sing that instead? Fine, I know that part too. Just get as prepared as you can. Try and knock their socks off in the audition, and they ended up hiring me. And I did my first tour with him was in '92, was The Great Adventure, and I toured with him on and off all the way till about 2006. So I was with him for a long time, sang on just about every one of his records from '97, Speechless, up and through the present time. I'm singing background vocals on some, if not all, the songs on the records. And so from there, I started to meet other people. We would do Christian festivals with Stephen. He was always a headliner at that point. And so we would meet people in the airport or in van rides to and from the venue, from the hotel. And you just start to meet people in that Christian industry at showcases and Gospel Music Week and the Dove Awards. And one of the guys I met was a bass player named Mark Childers, who would later go on to be Carrie Underwood's bass player and music director. And back in 2015, he found out that his keyboard player was not going to be in Carrie's band anymore. So he had to find a new keyboard player. And I was on his mind because he knew I could sing, because he'd seen me out there with Stephen Curtis Chapman, with Kenny Loggins, etc. And so he asked me if I'd be interested in auditioning. Of course, I said yes, and got my audition. It was between me and one other person, and we ended up hiring me, and that's how it happened. Just people you know.
So why, I know you said you moved to Nashville out of college, 89. Why Nashville and not LA or New York?
A lot of it was cost prohibitive. I knew that New York and LA were pretty expensive places to live. And I knew Nashville was a lot cheaper. Plus, at that time, I really kind of had my eyes set on, I really wanted to pursue some jobs in the Christian contemporary field. And that's pretty much the headquarters was in Nashville. And I had a lot of friends who were already working in that field. So they kind of helped blaze the trail for me and kick open a few doors for me. And I just kind of had a support system already there. I knew if I moved to Nashville, I'd have some friends right off the bat and just kind of wouldn't be out there on my own.
So you've talked a lot about how in your education, it wasn't necessarily a traditional music education. You like to learn by ear, you liked that sort of thing. So I guess if we were going to put a term on that, I think a lot of people would call that like informal music education. Would you say that was like a larger part of what got you to where you are now, or was it more of a mix of both? Like what has led you to more success?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think as far as being a live player, my ears probably helped me the most, and just being able to listen to something that someone wants to reproduce live and be able to pick out what's going on in the recording and reproduce it, not just the notes, but sonically. As a keyboard player, you have to kind of figure out how did they get that synthesizer sound, or what kind of keyboard is that, and just be able to differentiate what's going on and reproduce that. But by the same token, having a traditional education as well, as far as music reading and understanding theory and advanced chord structure, that's kind of helped me be a little more diverse in what I can do. And I'm not just, so when the live stuff dries up, I'm not just kind of stuck with nothing to do, no way to make money. But having studied theory in high school and theory in college, and taken the piano lessons where I learned about what these different chords sound like and how to voice them, and that has allowed me to do other things like chart and transcribe and be somebody's band leader, or be someone's music director, or music direct a show that someone wants to put together if it's a one-time thing. And I can make charts for the band, and I can lead a rehearsal, and I can listen and figure out who's not playing their part right and how to fix it. And it's enabled me to start all these tribute bands that I have in Nashville. We have a Steely Dan tribute, we have a Chicago tribute, we have an Eagles tribute, we have a little yacht rock band that we call Live from Ventura Boulevard. And and for each of these bands, it's, a lot of bands out there are just like, hey, learn this song, we'll show up at rehearsal and play through it. But our bands, I pretty much send everybody the charts for their instrument for each song. So I've got to sit down, figure out what songs we're going to play, do transcriptions for each instrument, give that out to the players, and then we rehearse. And once we can learn the stuff, it's really easy to just not play for 2 months and come back and do it without a rehearsal, because everybody's got music. Everybody can kind of self-rehearse at home. And it's allowed me to do the tribute band and the cover band thing a little more effectively, and a little more higher quality, to where if there's a sub that comes in, we're not having to reinvent the wheel every time. By just telling somebody to learn all these songs, we can, find a player who's a good reader and a good player, and save them a lot of time by just giving them all the charts. Then all they kind of have to do is figure it out and read, which is 80% easier than trying to figure it out by yourself and not have anything to have reference to. So it's enabled me to be really well-rounded in what I can do. I can teach piano lessons. If I was just an ear player, I probably couldn't teach a student how to play or how to read. But since I learned to read music and develop my ear, it's allowed me to kind of be a double threat and be able to handle things on both sides of the musical spectrum, whether it be informal or formal.
I think it's so interesting that you speak to all of these different aspects of music education, because I feel like a lot of our students in particular have a very narrow mind about what their music education could be or should be. And so to hear that both sides of things, or multiple sides of things, helped you reach where you are now, I think is super, super interesting.
Yes, and being able to notate music and understand what's going on, it has allowed me to prepare a lot quicker as well. For me personally, when I'm getting ready to do a tour, our music director gives us the songs, and what I usually do is I make a notation of what I'm going to play. And for some reason, the act of doing that helps burn it into my memory, so that I can recall it a lot quicker than if I was just play, listen, practice, play again, listen. Without making those notes and the formal charts that I make. And I do the same thing for the background vocals, so I can teach the background parts to all our background singers. And it's always there as a reference. If we decide there's 10 songs on the record, for example, and we only decide to do 7 on the tour. So we come down the road and, we're doing this TV show and we're getting this 8th song back out. We haven't played it. We may not have played it in 6 months. What were those background parts? Well, I can just go straight to the chart. Well, here are the parts. And this is what we learned, and we can do a quick refresher. I've got that as a note. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to try and remember it, because I know all I have to do is call up the chart. Oh, okay, there it is. I can read it. If I play for a lot of different cover bands, I play for this band called the Yacht Rock Schooner in Atlanta. And like I said, we have the Eagles tribute, the Steely Dan tribute. I can't keep all that music in my brain at the same time. But what I can do is make charts for it all, so that when it's time to do the Yacht Rock Schooner gig, okay, I can open up Fourscore on my iPad and just put the songs in order, and I can read them on the gig with minimal preparation. I just kind of have to do a quick refresher. Oh yeah, that's what I was singing. Okay, that's what I was playing. And it's much easier than trying to dig it back out and practice for 8-12 hours or whatever it's going to take to recall that music again, because I've got a written record of what I'm going to play.
I think even to both Marissa and Scott's point, the idea of, I think not even just students have kind of a narrow mind in different ways, but I just think depending on what discipline you're in, like there's some really cool studies or videos and things like that talk about the difference between an orchestral player reading like complicated rhythms versus a jazz player who might feel a little differently, and just how they approach different situations. And I think it's nice to hear from someone who's actually performing in the field, like the importance of being able to do both and how to approach it from both angles is really, really big, I think.
It's just, it's, like I said, it's allowed me to be valuable and to be an asset to whoever I work for. If, for instance, if they want to do an award show or something where, hey, we want to put a choir behind Carrie or whoever for this particular thing, can you do a choir arrangement? Yes, I can do a choir arrangement. I can write out choir parts. I can teach choir parts. I know what vocal parts are going to work because I'm a singer. And, I've sung with gospel choirs, so I know that genre. I know what's going to be idiomatic to that, type of group. They're going to be different than if you put a more traditional church choir up there. so it's just been a huge help, and it's allowed me to be valuable and to be able to kind of get in some different places where, a normal sideman would just be like, I don't know how to do that, but I can say yes to more things.
Do you ever find yourself with transcription in a position where you can't necessarily figure out like a traditional notation for something, and you have to, that's what I always like reading. It happens more modern, I think, than the classic ones, but I love looking at jazz solo transcriptions because there's things that people do on instruments that they probably didn't exist until the moment that the person made that noise. And I like to see what someone notates it as.
How are you going to write that out?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Especially in improvisation, there's so much that's laid back and it's loose, and it's gotta be, I mean, that's what makes it great. It makes it cool. So yeah, it's definitely, there's not a particular notation for everything, and people hear things differently. Especially, if all you have to go by is the final mix, I'm not going to get everything right. I'm going to get it close enough that it sounds good, but the person who played it might look at it later and say, oh, that's not exactly what I played. And there's different overtones that bleed through a mix. You might, a piano might present itself sounding like a horn at some place, and you say, wow, that's not the piano part, that's actually a horn part, or something like that. There's different instruments can disguise themselves, especially with effects and guitars and swells, and they can sound like string pads and keyboard pads. And so a lot of times you're guessing, depending on how loud an instrument is. It might fade so far back in the mix that you're just kind of like, I don't know what he's playing. I'll just put slashes in there, or I'll just make up a part that I know it's going to work. Or that part might have presented itself a little louder in the first chorus than the second chorus. So now we'll just copy it from the first chorus because that's probably what they ended up playing. But, the way music's made these days, there's really not a whole lot of charts written for recording sessions. You may get a chord chart, and guys are making it up as they go, and they might not even remember what they did the first chorus, and they might do it a little differently the second chorus. So it's not like, I think back in the 80s and 70s, there was a lot more guys would show up to recording sessions and they'd actually have a notated chart in front of them. The arranger had thought about it beforehand and put it all together in his head. And I'm sure they changed it and tweaked it a little bit. But nowadays, it's just guys show up with their gear and they listen to a demo and they make up their own parts, or they copy what's on the demo because that's what the producer likes. And especially in Nashville, they're reading number charts, rarely reading notation charts, unless you might be doing a choral session or a gospel session. And, you might do the rare film score or something like that actually has actual notation written out. And there are guys in town who are known as the readers, and there are other guys that known they're not the readers. And so some guys get the calls and other guys don't get the calls, and vice versa.
My uncle told me that you were, quote, a musical genius, and I think he's right. Definitely right. Wow.
I think your early teacher, especially in college, saw your gifting in your hearing. That's one of the things a lot of musicians that we know are really great when it comes to have music on the page, but their oral skills are really not that up to par. So I imagine your teachers saw, that's why they said, oh, there's something there. Well, probably your talent as well. I have kids in my music theory that are garage banders, and I say, and you know what, they've got skills. They've got the hearing skills because they can learn it by ear. I say you want to be that, like you said, that extra threat. So when you go into a session and they give you a piece of music, and it's got something written down, you can actually play that and you're going to go further. So thank you. That's
encouraging. I don't have many students, but because I can't really offer a steady schedule for them. I can't commit to being there every week. But there is one particular family that has basically said, we'll take you when you can get you. And their son, who's my student, I knew from the very beginning, his mom and the lesson company that was hiring me at the time, they said, he's definitely plays by ear, but he also can read. So we've kind of taken that dual threat path all the way along. When we learn a new song, he'll learn a Steely Dan song, but he'll learn it from something that I've written out for him to play. And, and then we'll do something from his Faber book as well, where he's just learning to read, period. And I'll teach him chords. And then when he learns triads, we move to seventh chords, and he learns the seventh chords. Then we move to 9 chords, and then we move to 13 chords. And then we'll introduce a song that has these chords in it so that he can read them and know what they sound like and know what they look like on the page. And so I've just kind of tried to stress with him, if you really want to be a professional musician, if you can develop these reading skills, you can be, twice as effective, twice as valuable to guys that are going to hire you.
Right.
I think, and I remember this with my younger brother, because there's 3 of us, and I went into music and my middle brother went into music. And by the time we got to the youngest, he had like an earlier start. I remember so much of his music reading not at the level of what his ear was, and he would sit downstairs with like an album on, and he would just play through the entire album, and he's playing things on saxophone, he's playing things with like 5 sharps, 6 sharps, minor, 6/8, and he has no earthly idea that he's playing it. And if I put something in front of him like that, he wouldn't be able to read it.
Right.
But it was just this cool idea of like being able to build the skills to meet in the middle. And I think I was thinking about it as you were saying the MTV thing. It seems like a dated thing to say, and I'm sure kids have heard it before, but MTV doesn't exist in the way that it used to, when like all of, even us to an extent, were growing up, but I think you guys especially, like it was just music all the time, and you could play along with it. And I think it's a blessing and it's a curse that it exists in the way it does now, where you can listen to a song on YouTube and you don't have to have that moment of, I want to play this song. What chord are they using, or what are they doing here? Instead, you can just say, I'll look up the tab, or I'll just look up the chords here. And it takes that aural inventiveness out of it. That it's a good thing, and it's a tough thing, I think, from a certain extent, or from a certain approach.
I really enjoyed MTV. I got a lot out of it, and especially my Sony boombox. I wore that thing out too. Having that cassette player next to the piano, I could just reach over and do a quick
Marissa, cassette.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you I was late to the party on this show. Did you ever watch? You mentioned Hall & Oates a couple times. Did you ever watch the Live at Daryl's House? And just,
Yes,
I like
have
the
seen
small
a few different
snippets.
episodes of that.
I like the small snippets of exactly what you're talking about in terms of almost that studio production of, they're bringing these guest artists in and they're teaching them how to do their tunes, and they're doing it by ear, and they're kind of giving them these hooks and these things and just teaching them as they go. I thought it was really cool to watch that approach to it. It was neat. Kenny Loggins is on that too at some point, Marissa, just so you know.
Oh my God.
It's Footloose though. It's not Top Gun. It's totally different.
You're killing me. All right. We have a lot of kids asking questions. So if you don't mind, I'm going to toss a few of them to you. Do you have like a favorite venue or a particularly impactful performance that you remember from your career touring with any of the bands?
Probably one of the most special things we were able to do. We've played Madison Square Garden a few times, and that's kind of seems like the mecca for live touring. It's just such a legendary venue. But we were able to film a live DVD there on our last tour, the Storyteller tour, and that was pretty special to go back and watch that, because the guy who mixed the audio was Chris Lord-Alge, and he did a phenomenal job. The concert sounds absolutely stellar, and so it's just so cool to actually go back and be able to see it from the audience's perspective, because when you're on stage, you miss so many of the effects that are going on above you and around you that you don't really appreciate it every night. You kind of see some of it depending on where you are on stage, but and to also hear it just presented in a really pristine way, where it's really fun to listen to and watch. So that's one of the most special things I've been able to do, at least in the most recent memory. There's a few places that I haven't played that I'd like to play. I'd like to play Red Rocks. That's one venue I haven't got on I do have on my bucket list, and Royal Albert Hall in London is another. But I've played the Greek Theater and the Hollywood Bowl, and there's some great those are some great venues out in Los Angeles. Played the Staples Center, and most of the NBA arenas were part of the tour. That's kind of the places that we end up playing. So the Allentown Fair's got a special place in my heart. I was able to play that for the first time in 2015, and we're scheduled to come back this year. So I hope it stays on the calendar. I hope all this can clear up at least enough for us to come and do a show.
Well, Pennsylvania is going to probably be one of the last. So
to open up again. Yeah, we haven't heard so far. I don't know. So I guess we'll see. But that definitely has a special place in my heart. That's the only really big venue I've played in Lehigh Valley. We played Penn's Peak. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
In Jim Thorpe.
Yeah.
Oh,
I did a Kenny Loggins show at Penn's Peak. That was about the closest I came to the Lehigh Valley with any of the touring that I've done. We played Hershey and Philly, but in Penn's Peak, and then of course Allentown, we played the PP&L Center with Carrie back in 2016.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, the Allentown Fairgrounds, you've got more teeth than the whole fair.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry, all of you that are from Allentown, but it's true.
There are a lot of kids that are asking a lot about the cover bands, and one that keeps popping up is, do you have a favorite, since you do the cover bands and you arrange a lot of stuff, do you have like a favorite Eagles song? Is the one that keeps popping up. Eagles is the most consistent one.
Favorite Eagles song? Well, for selfish reasons, I Can't Tell You Why is one of the favorite ones to do, because that's the one I sing lead on. I'm not the Donna Henley singer, so he covers all that rest of that stuff. But I also really like playing Life in the Fast Lane. I play kind of a fake guitar on Life in the Fast Lane. It's a plugin that I use. I use MainStage when I'm out performing for my software. I don't take I take a hardware keyboard, but it's purely as a controller. I get all my sounds from my computer. And there's a plugin called Real Les Paul, Real LP. And I'm able to kind of be a fake guitar player for Life in the Fast Lane. It makes it a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
The other one that I keep seeing pop up is like, do you have a favorite moment from working with one of the big artists? Like, was there something that happened on stage that was very memorable or impactful? Cool, really out of the ordinary.
Yeah, there was when I was with Kenny Loggins. He does a lot of private shows because he's kind of a legacy artist. He's been around for a long time. And one of the things we did was on Hawaii. It was on Maui. They were selling some expensive plots of land around the Prince Golf Course in Kihei. And one of the things they were doing for these people who invested in these different housing developments was they put on a concert for them, which was Michael McDonald and Kenny Loggins, and they shared Kenny's band. So that was the first time I got to play with Kenny and Michael. And so we were able to play some of the songs they wrote together and some of Michael's songs. And it was just fantastic. Hearing his voice come through my monitors was truly something special. And when we did What a Fool Believes and Sweet Freedom, and then he came up and sang This Is It with Kenny, and that was pretty fantastic. And the setting, you couldn't beat it. We were out on this beautiful golf course on Maui, and you could see the ocean, and you can't beat a free trip to Hawaii, even if it is for only 2 or 3 days.
Oh man. Did you always see yourself ending up in this career, or did you, when you moved in '89, did you say, we'll see, and if not, I'll do something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always you have your dreams of what you'd love to do, but I never was like overly confident. Oh yeah, that was just a matter of time, and then I'm going to be doing this and this and this. It's just all of a sudden these doors open up, and before you know it, I'm looking back saying, I can't believe what I'm doing right now. This is crazy. I work as a correspondent for a website called InsideMusicast.com, and they do interviews with some legendary session players and songwriters and producers over the years. It's a fantastic website to go listen to their podcasts, especially if you're a commuter and want to kill 40 minutes every day or whatever. But I also post content for them about 5 or 6 times a year. And this is my week to post. And I think the song that I posted today actually was a song by a band called Airplay. And Airplay was a band put together by 2 huge producers, David Foster. He's done Whitney Houston and Chicago and Andrea Bocelli and everybody around the globe. He's a fantastic producer. And another guy named Jay Graydon, who was a brilliant producer and songwriter in his own right, produced Al Jarreau and Manhattan Transfer. But they put this band together as kind of a super group. And one of the songs that Dennis Smith introduced me to in high school was one of their tunes. And I was just listening to this crazy, great song, and just started to follow these guys, and anything they put their hands on, I would listen to and dissect. I wanted to hear records made by the players they were using. They were using fantastic session players. So I would look for credits and try and find these guys on other records and what else have they written, they wrote a song for DeBarge. I'm going to buy that DeBarge record. I just want to hear that song, or it's for Kenny Rogers or whatever. I just kind of follow them. And to look back, I just posted a video on Facebook of then another Airplay song from that record that we performed as a band here in Nashville. And through a friend of a friend, I got in touch with Jay Graydon on Facebook and was able to show him that video. And we just kind of started a friendship and started messaging each other. And you combine that with the transcribing work I did with David Foster. And I'm looking back and saying, I can't believe this band that I fell in love with in high school, I'm now working for one of the guys, and I'm developing a friendship with one of the other guys on Facebook. Just to look back at everything I was watching Kenny Loggins videos in high school on MTV. I was watching him play Footloose and Forever and I'm All Right and all that stuff. And then I'm on stage with them playing these songs, and it's just surreal. Just looking back, thinking, why did I get here? But it's just different steps, different doors open along the way, and God has a path for you, and you don't know what it is. You just kind of along for the ride, and just doing what you can to put your best foot forward and practice and work hard and always present your best efforts. No matter whether you're playing for 10 people in a seedy bar or you're playing for 10,000 in an arena.
I think it's so interesting to hear you talk. You kind of just answered my next question, but I live a mile from Saucon Valley High School, and and you're throwing around these names of places and people that we are all, still involved with, but then to also hear that, and then the progression leading up to, Kenny Loggins and Carrie Underwood and all of these other big names. I just think it's so inspirational. I mean, it's exciting for me, but I would imagine the kids are also like, wow, this is actually possible. And it's also nice to hear how much work you had to put into it. And it wasn't just like an overnight YouTube success.
No, I mean,
So.
I didn't start working. It took me 26 years in Nashville to get my first real country gig. So, granted, I wasn't pursuing that genre in particular. I was working with some pretty big names, pop music. I played with Richard Marx for a while, and but between Stephen Curtis Chapman and Kenny Loggins, I went all over the globe. So even though Carrie's probably the biggest name I've ever played with, I got to do some pretty special things with those other folks. We went to Singapore and the Philippines, and I went to South Korea and China and Australia and New Zealand. And I've never been to Africa. That's one place I've never been, but just down in Ecuador with Stephen Curtis Chapman and Alaska. And so, it's really taken me all over the place.
Wow. Do you guys have any questions before I?
Diane King or Miss King has a question. Is there any funny story or when something went strangely wrong?
Let's see. Strangely wrong. The only thing I can maybe tell a quick story. It was, unfortunately, of all places, it was in Nashville. And let's just say something I ate didn't agree with me. And I was in the middle of a particular song, and I had absolutely no choice but to run off stage in the middle of the song. And my wife was in the audience. She was up in the balcony. And so she had backstage access at the time. She came down and was able to check on me. And I was able to deal with the situation, shall we say, as quickly as possible. And I did make it back out onto the stage before that song was over. But it definitely had a few people in the band wondering what was going on, as well as our tour manager and my wife. That's probably the strangest thing that's ever happened in an actual show. You have the usual technical glitches where, you might be playing along with a track and something's not firing correctly. And so then you may have to go completely 100% live or whatever. And nobody hardly knows the difference. And of course you might forget the lyrics here and there. But as far as anything going terribly wrong, I've really kind of been lucky and been blessed in that area. It's not gone horribly bad.
Yeah. All right. Well, we don't want to keep you much longer because we've taken up about an hour. But do you have any you've said a lot, but any advice or any last words, particularly for the students watching?
Don't sleep on Crossroads Pizza. You got to make your way over to Hellertown and get some of that if you haven't already.
It's true.
Let's see. Potts Hot Dogs, Bethlehem. Jay's Subs for this cheesesteaks. That's my favorite cheesesteak. But there aren't many Jay's left. You really have to look for them. Stefco Boulevard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've pretty much covered everything. Work hard, give it your best effort. Never stop learning. Never stop listening. Unfortunately, this could be just me, but to me, the music that's out is getting less and less interesting, and I don't know if it's because the audience doesn't like more complicated music, or if it's because the providers are lazy, or that's always kind of a chicken and egg question that I've wondered about. What happened to the great melodic songs from the 80s, 70s, and 80s? It's hard to get. People aren't getting much beyond the 1, the 4, the 5, and the 6 minor chord these days. And I don't know if it's just because of YouTube and you learn to play guitar in 15 minutes and you play those 4 chords and you can write songs. But explore a 2 major chord maybe, or a 3 major chord, or a 6 major chord, or a flat 7 chord, or a flat 6 chord. Experiment, use interesting chords. They don't have to be jazzy, but stretch out. God made 12 notes for a reason, not so you could just use 4 chords. So experiment and listen to timeless music. There's some absolutely great music that might be older, but I think from what we found out playing these cover band shows around town, we get a lot of young audiences come out and see us because they're hearing these songs for the first time and they're going, wow. My student is 15 years old, 16 years old, and he's absolutely fallen in love with Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers and Hall & Oates and just stuff that he could sink his teeth into that make his ears go, wow, that's a cool chord. That sounds great. How do I play that? How do I learn how to write like that? What chord is that? Just explore all the great stuff out there.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This is really wonderful. I know I enjoyed the conversation. So on behalf of all of us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for hanging out.